Welcome to Yelling Into the Void, a podcast discussing and exploring topics in World of Warcraft. I'm Tevin. Scott joins me as always, and I need to start this off with a bit of a brash comment, Scott.
Hmm.
I just want to say, in almost every way possible, we were right.
Yeah, I believe in being modest and self-deprecating at times, but sometimes you just gotta brush the shoulders off and allow yourself the victory of calling basically everything that happened. Not everything though. I am willing to eat crow on some things that were changed this week. Were not what I would have predicted, but yeah, I think for the most part we nailed this.
There was a. It's wild to me that we made some of the changes that we did middle of the season. Like the level 8 keystone changes, I think are great, but it's weird to me that we did that now and not at the beginning of season 2.
Yeah, that is basically the one thing of all the changes that we'll get into in a lot of detail in a second that I didn't think they were going to do. Nerfing the dungeons, yes. Making adjustments to the Keystone level 12 affix, yes. I did not think they would do something as dramatic as shift what Crest. I think actually I even said last week is like that I don't think they do something as dramatic as what Crest is dropping from what key level change, but they did.
Well, for news, I guess we've kind of already touched on this a little bit, but there's been a decent amount happening. And there's one thing on here that I don't currently have, but I think it's worth a call out. The Firelands stuff for Cata Classic is going to be very soon. I think that they are playtesting it now, if I recall correctly. That's on the PTR now.
Yeah, it is on the PTR. Yeah.
Raid included in that, because before it was just the like dailies and stuff like that, but this is raid included in the PTR as well now.
Yeah. I can't decide whether Blizzard has just kind of abandoned Cata Classic, or it's just because I'm not playing it anymore. It feels like it's been abandoned, but I guess I was perusing the internet today because I like to kind of keep up with what people are saying, and it feels like a lot of the Cata players feel like they've been abandoned. I think it's going to be, by the time that raid comes live, it'll be 5 months on tier 11, which is way slower than anyone predicted. I think they are like technically meeting their roadmap of what they said when months and months ago, because I'm pretty sure the roadmap said this phase would come out in October, and technically it, while the raid doesn't come out till November 6th or something, technically this phase launches on October 29th. So they got in there. They did it. But I think people are a little disappointed by that. I'm not, because we've been so going hard for retail this past month and a half, and like I really would love to jump into Firelands and raid in Firelands. So like honestly, the longer it takes for it to come out, the better from my perspective. So I'm chilling.
The sad thing about this is it's almost like they're like staying true to form in a Cata rerun, where it's like the game is in such a shit state when they first release it, and then they just ignore all their problems until like Firelands releases. They're going to do a bunch of maybe sweeping changes, make it better, and then ignore the rest of the problems until the next expansion again. Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of sad.
I mean, like there's a part of me that's like, well, what did we expect? Like the whole thing about this progression classic servers is that you're just gonna relive the expansion. Like what if I'm Blizzard, I'm kind of like, what do you want from me? Like we're just releasing the patches in the same cadence. They're gonna be in the same state they were in when they came out. You should have expected all of this. I will say that like they're introducing essentially like the Gamma dungeon system from Wrath of the Lich King Classic, but they haven't said like anything about it yet, I don't think. So that's like so they are making like changes, and they're introducing this new catch up mechanic via dungeons like they did in the previous classic expansion, but how does it work? What is the affix in it? It's like what's the difficulty scale? Like none of these questions have answers, and it feels really weird. And I think this is being as charitable as possible, this is kind of just the result of running SOD and Cataclassic at the same time. I know it's not the exact same team members, but it's a lot of the same team members. It's a lot of the same core group. And they're obviously very, very busy with SOD, which seems to have righted itself. I'm never going to try it out, but the popular sentiment around Season of Discovery is since they made it to max level and started releasing stuff like this new raid. I think Blackwing Layer just came out. It seems like most people are pretty positive on it.
Is it still 40-man raids?
I think they changed the raids where it's minimum 20, but it will scale to 40.
Oh,
I think
flex
that was like
raids?
their compromise. Yeah, they introduced kind of a flex system there. I don't think that was the case in Molten Core when it first came out. Actually, it was the case in Molten Core when it first came out, but it was a bug. And they fixed the bug, and then everyone got really mad. And then so for Blackwing Layer, they did it. So it is technically 20 man, but it will scan. I'm not sure if it scans all the way up to scales all the way up to 40. I think it might scale up to 30 or something. I am definitely not the expert of these, so this don't take anything I'm saying here as Bible. I've just kind of been like observing from the sidelines.
Mhm.
But yeah, it is. They are doing a little bit of scaling. I don't even know if it's necessarily scaling. I think it's just perhaps that the bosses remain the same, but the raid will allow people above that 20 player threshold into the raid. So I'm not sure if it's
Gotcha.
traditional scaling or not.
Gotcha. Well, I think that we should probably talk about the game that you and I play the most
Yeah, the one
in
we're actually playing. Yeah.
retail. So there were sweeping changes to Mythic Plus. Again, this is kind of what we were calling for last week. Happy to see this. We'll get into more detail on this here in a few minutes,
Yep.
but that's kind of where we're at now. There's also been some pretty hefty nerfs to some raid bosses. There's been a lot of sweeping, like mythic nerfs for both, I think, Court and Ansarek. And then there's been some pretty major nerfs for every difficulty of Ansarek as well. I think it's really only heroic that gets impacted. It says every difficulty, but I'm pretty sure it's really only heroic that gets impacted because it's the only one that you have two of the frothing toxin bounces.
Yeah.
But again, we can get into that a little bit later. And then the other big thing to call out is you can get your 3%, now 2.2 something percent damage and healing increase
Mm-hmm.
for the raid this week. It's a bit weird and convoluted on how it works. Every 2 weeks you get this, but you have to full clear the raid 2 times to be able to get them. So every week you need to be full clearing the raid, be it on LFR or normal or heroic or mythic, whatever you're doing it on. You have to kill every single boss because each boss drops one. There's 8 bosses. You need 16. And then you turn them in and you get a damage increase in the raid. So I guess the min-max way to do this is to LFR normal it up before your heroic run. I don't think I'm doing that, but
So
I think that's the min-max.
I think my understanding is that doesn't actually work. So,
Really?
so s- first of all, they are. This is really confusing, and this is once again Blizzard not doing a very good job of explaining this to people who don't like obsessively read websites like I do to understand all this stuff. Because the way I believe it works is, first of all, these are character bound, but they're war bound, so you can trade this currency between your war band. And the lockout is based on a character. But I think you can only trade up to the cap anyway. But it is restricted to one version of the kill total per week per character. So like if you kill it on normal and then you kill it on heroic, you will not get 2 of this currency.
Right.
The only exception to this is on mythic, each boss drops 2. So if you kill it on heroic and then kill it on mythic, you will get 1 on heroic and then you will get another 1 on mythic. You get the extra mythic one, but you would not get 2 on mythic. But they can be tradable to your war band. So there was reports from people last week that were doing like 8 on one character and then like 2 on another character, and then we're able to trade them, but not enough to get up to the 16. I don't quite understand why that works. It's really weird and convoluted, and it shouldn't be so. I think they need to simplify it a little bit. It's also the thing I didn't realize about this is it's your character, not the raid, right? So like each character is going to go into the raid some people might have the percentage bonus, some people might not have the percentage
Hmm.
bonus, which is going to be really weird when it comes to like logging. I'm assuming like Warcraft logs will just find a way to just pull this amount out because it's just a flat percentage increase, so it should be pretty easy to just calculate this out. But when you're looking at like details, I'm assuming details is going to be happily calculating that increased damage and healing, and it's just going to be weird since not all people might have it.
So this is capping at 18%. Is that what they've said?
Yes, 18%. So I believe the week of January, end of January is when you will reach the final stacks because it's every two
Yeah.
weeks, 2 point whatever percent per week.
January 21st
Yeah,
is what's coming to my mind.
yeah,
But
yeah.
either way, so I guess my question is, if this is as weird as you're explaining it, why? So we already, there's a buff system in the game, which happens when you level up a character. You get a buff on your account that allows you to level another character 5% faster.
Hmm.
And when you get another one, 10% faster, all the way up to 25%. We can do buff, like account wide buffs. Why isn't this just an account wide buff?
So it is. So this will count on all your characters across your warband once
Okay.
you do the
Okay.
quest. Yeah, it will, but like the acquisition is a little bit weird. Um, for some
Gotcha.
reason. I don't fully
Well,
understand it myself, but it's like the point is there's really no point in min maxing this, I guess. Like I believe it will have catch up mechanics in the same way that the Helm enchant from Yggdrasil had a catch up mechanic where bosses would just start dropping more of the stuff to get you to the cap the later you start. I mean, I guess the overall comment on this I have is like, I think ultimately this buff is meant to make up for the faster gear acquisition process that exists with crests and the fact that you reach max eye level much quicker, and therefore the people that progress through mythic um, aren't that far ahead of everyone of the early guilds doing it, and therefore like the
sure.
gear upgrades don't get them over the hump of getting over these more difficult bosses, and so this is meant to help facilitate that. I get it. Why do we have to do it in this really convoluted way? Like they did this in Ice Crown Citadel, and there was just a buff that stacked every couple weeks over time. And then if you wanted to turn off the buff, you could like I think you could just talk to someone. Like if you wanted to do that and play hardcore like with the no buff, you could turn that off. But like why do we have to do this convoluted questing system and make each individual raider have to loot this thing and turn in this quest, and it just it feels like too much mess for nothing ultimately.
Mm. Yeah, I it doesn't make sense to me. I sometimes wish that like I get the like feeling of like this makes you feel like you're progressing your character maybe, and that might be why they're going for it, but at the end of the day, this doesn't feel like something that needs to be tied to your character progression because it's an account wide progression, and at that it should be a raid wide progression. It shouldn't be an account wide progression.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm totally with you. That seems way more complicated and convoluted than it needs to be.
Yeah.
And I can't say that there's anything that's more World of Warcraft than that exact situation you just described.
It's just, yeah. If you're thinking about trying to min max this, my suggestion would like that's the thing is like the people that need this buff are not the people min maxing because like if you're min maxing, you're probably good. And I mean, I guess maybe initial like if you're like progressing on uh princess or if you're progressing on Silken Court, maybe that will be enough to get you over that hump. But yeah, I don't know. It's it's just a lot of work for relatively little, I think.
Well, in other news, we have the MDI time trials coming up.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and I don't know if you've seen this. There's a pretty awesome team that's being submitted to the MDI.
No, I haven't seen this. What is this?
There is a team. It's Team Dorkin.
So he is
It's
doing it.
here. I gotta find it. Our guild leader sent me the actual list of people who were in this team, but I'm pretty sure it's now Azuna, Growl, Dorky, and I forget who the other person is. I need to look it up.
Wow.
but it's gonna be a team. Yeah. It's now Growl, Azuna, Drogo, and Dorky.
Who's tanking?
I would assume now is gonna tank and
Yeah,
Dorky will DPS.
and then I guess
I would assume Growl's gonna heal and Drogo will DPS.
yeah.
I
I
don't
have
know. I've
seen
never
I
seen
have
either.
seen Growl on Augmentation Evoker though, so maybe he's gonna run Og.
Maybe Jangbi will make an appearance.
No way. No way. This is Growl's return to the MDI though. It's been a long time. This is huge.
I don't expect a lot from this team. I'm gonna be honest. It's gonna be nice to watch him play, but I don't expect
It's
him
the
to be
meme team.
actually.
I'm pretty it's not the dream team, it's the meme team. I like it. I like it.
But yeah, so that's pretty cool. Looking forward to seeing that. And again, MDI is like right around the corner. It doesn't feel like it is, but it is.
It's crazy.
Uh, and I think the only other real call out here is more so just because I found it funny. So if you have been looking at any shorts around World of Warcraft lately at all, you've probably seen a short by a guy named Mage God doing some absolutely wacky stuff in PvP where he's like just destroying like an enemy team in like a millisecond or something like that. Well, he stepped into to our realm for a little bit. He did some PvE content. And apparently some of the PvP toys work in PvE to the point where they just completely break the game. Uh so he was using this like web pull toy
Oh, I've heard
on
of this.
Mistcaller, and he pulled Mistcaller at her last like guessing game, and she just never recast it. So the like 10% guessing game that she does, they completely skipped and just killed the boss. And apparently people have been using it on Silken Court, and it just turns like it breaks all the bosses like spell queuing and everything. They just don't cast spells and turn into punching bags. That's been patched. All of this has been patched,
Shit.
but I thought it was pretty funny. And Wowhead made sure that they added if you use something that essentially takes away all boss mechanics and turn them into a punching bag, they heavily suggest not doing that.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I do wonder, like, will Blizzard do anything about this? Like, and I lean towards no. Like, they're just gonna, as you said, they patched it out. It's done. It's over. Like, are they gonna like punish people? Probably not. But that's fun. I knew there was something going on. Like, so I was out of town all weekend, so I was kind of playing catch up on news today, and I saw something about how Silken Court people were doing an exploit and it was nerfed, but I didn't know that's what it was. That's very funny.
yep. There were like 3 different PvP items that cause forced movement that could all be used to like break the spell queuing for a bunch
Yeah,
of different
I don't
bosses.
think this should be an exploit because Blizzard fucked up. It's their fault. They didn't flag these things correctly. It's their fault.
Well, the funny thing is Mage God put out that short in Mists, and literally like I think I got the message from one of our guildies at like 9 a.m. And I was like, "There's no way that this makes it through reset." Before the day was even over, they had patched it.
Oh yeah.
Like it was so fast.
Oh yeah. I mean, the
Uh,
second they start doing this in raid, like they're gonna patch it right away.
But yeah, I think it's funny. I think it's scummy if people were using this to get like mythic world first kills or like Hall of Fame kills. But I mean, outside of that, it's pretty innocent
Mm-hmm.
and kind of funny to talk about.
It's pretty funny.
So,
I think it's funny. I wish I could have just run in and started yanking bosses around. That would have been fun.
uh, anything else news wise I am missing before we jump into kind of the like main
I
segments?
guess not really. I mean, the big thing is like a week from today, as we're recording, the 20th anniversary patch will be out, which brings with it a whole bunch of new stuff, including a whole raid, a whole big raid. Like a new raid is coming in a week. Isn't that kind of weird? I mean, it's not like it's like it's not a real raid, but it's a multiple boss raid that is supposedly going to have new mechanics, and we're going to get to
Drops
do it.
hero gear, right?
I believe so. I mean, it has a heroic mode, so I believe it drops hero gear. I think it's going to be like special 20th anniversary only gear that I think it'll actually be tokens, not necessarily gear. It's going to drop a bunch of currency. It's going to drop a bunch of different things. And hopefully it's fun, but it's kind of wild. I know there's a lot of controversy over like how long it's going to take to actually acquire all the tier 2 stuff. Like I think they said something to the effect of like the first of the tier sets you get will take 3 weeks of you capping on these currency that you need to get. If you're capping on it each week, which will require you to do a lot of dailies and things like that, you'll get your first one after 3 weeks, and then the price of them from there go down. But people are kind of upset about how long it takes, like especially in like a for fun, just like have a good time, like anniversary event. The idea that you're having to grind currency to get just an updated res skin of a tier set that's been out for almost 20 years. It's like I get why people are upset about that.
You know what this reminds me of?
Hmm.
Plunderstorm.
Yeah.
It's just people saying, well, I have to do all of this and I hate doing all of this. It's like, well, you don't really have to. Also, I have a fucking bone to pick with Blizzard over that. All of the Plunderstorm shit was added to the trading post last month.
No.
Literally everything that you could get.
They colored it differently.
So annoying.
So it's different. Yeah, I mean, I get it. Like everyone's like, you know how long it's gonna take to get all 13 tier sets, and I'm standing here like, well, you don't have to do that.
Yeah, right.
Just get the ones for the classes that you play. But you know, this is World of Warcraft. People are gonna be like this. So,
well, I guess we should probably jump into it because we've got a lot to cover when it comes to Mythic Plus alone. So I kind of want to do that. So I guess the first thing to really call out here, and we've already touched on a few of these, the +8 change for crests. Funnily enough, there was a literal comment on our video saying like, hey man, they should just lower Gilded Crest to +8. And I think that would solve a lot of problems. The same day, the exact same day that comment was left, they did that. They did that exact thing as a hotfix. It happened immediately, and we could just go in, start doing 8s, and we can, get our Gilded Crest now.
Yeah, this was the change that I was most surprised by, as we said. Like, I did not think that they were going to actually dramatically change the acquisition process this much. I didn't think they were going to do that. So now, like, all bets are off. They could do anything. I think this is a good change. I think this is it solves a problem. I was listening to some other people talk today about how this doesn't actually solve the problem. It just moves where the bottleneck is. And I'm like, I mean, yes, but the problem is where the bottleneck is. Like, that was the problem. Like, there's always going to be a break point in any system like this where people are going to get stuck right before the break point and unable to advance past it. The problem here was that many people thought that the break point being going from an 8 to a 9 was too challenging and too stringent. So yes, it just shifts the break point back a key, but like, that was the problem. So it does solve the problem. I mean, yes, there are going to be people who are hard stuck at 7s that are still complaining and like, well, I can't get Gilded Crests because I can't do 8s. Like, yes, this does not solve the problem for them, but it does like lessen the problem. So yeah, good change.
So I think this is a good change. And another thing that kind of came up in our comments section, and I still don't know how I feel about this, but everybody was pointing towards kind of like crafted gear could be your stopgap for not being able to get some of the higher item level items that you're used to getting when you're timing, old 16s. You would get your highest level crests and be able to upgrade your stuff past a certain level. I guess there's a couple of interesting things happening with crafted items right now that kind of play into this. In that I don't think crafted items, at least from my looking into it, have really went down in price since the beginning of the expansion all too terribly much. But also, people crafting items aren't really charging for the crafts anymore, which is another weird thing to me.
The cartels have been broken and smashed. And yeah, the majority of things I've crafted this expansion, people have just said, send whatever tip you want. They've and typically, I mean, my typical response to that is to send a higher tip than I would have normally, which maybe they've just all like caught on to that and that's why they're doing it now. Because I'm like, oh, whatever I want, eh? Oh, well, here's a 3K bonus on top of what I was going to want to pay
Mhm.
for it. But yeah, there's a really interesting phenomenon happening here. I think with materials for all kinds of crafted things and consumables and like everything seems like really expensive still. Like enchants, like a tier 3 chest enchant is still 10K on our
Yep.
server. And it's like that's a lot of money. Like I'm spending a lot of money in this, and like consumables, all of it, everything just seems like it's gone up in price a pretty significant amount. So yeah, I agree with you. The idea that crafted is this perfect like gap filler for people that are struggling to get nines timed, or I guess now eights. Well, first of all, that crafted piece will only get you to 619 if you're not timing nines or eights now. So it's not really a stopgap. And second of all, yeah, some of the stuff is just priced out for some people. These mats are enormously expensive. I mean, I am a person who buys WoW tokens, and I don't mind doing that. Paying a little bit of extra money every so often to get a little influx of money to pay for things. I don't mind doing that, but certainly not should not be a thing that the majority of player base is expected to do. So, yeah, I mean, I wish I could say that crafted items serve perfectly as this kind of filler or this help for people that are struggling with these hierarchies, but I just ultimately don't think they are.
Yeah, the biggest problem that I have with this is I feel like stuff is just way too expensive right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't even bought tier 3 consumables. Like, and it sounds
No.
so stupid as somebody who normally is like right on top of like buy your tier 3 enchants, buy your tier 3 consumables, buy all of this stuff. I haven't even done that. And I went into this expansion with like over 1 million gold or something like that, and I'm already running out because I had to spend like uh, hell, I crafted a weapon for my alt yesterday, and it cost me like I want to say after the enchant and everything, it was like 55K
Mm-hmm.
for a character that is not my main.
Yeah.
Like it's and that doesn't seem expensive, but like when you think about like every crafted piece is going to give you like cost this much money, that's a lot.
Yeah, I
It's a
mean,
lot.
so I don't understand crafting in this game very much at all. Like, what is happening here? Because, like, I think when Dragonflight came out under this new crafting system, I think that things at the jump were very expensive, like they are now. But I also think in Dragonflight, my perception was, and maybe I'm just remembering wrong, but my perception was that things like took a nosedive in price very very quickly, especially things like consumables and item enhancement stuff like enchants and gems and stuff. I feel like that stuff just like absolutely plummeted in price very very quickly, and that just hasn't happened. We're now what, almost 2 months into the expansion, and we haven't really seen any. I mean, yes, prices have gone down, but it's not been significant at all. It's wild.
So I think this is twofold. The first thing being they are requiring a lot of these like I don't know what else to call them other than like delve materials, like the profane tinderbox, and stuff like that. Um, and then the other thing is I think that the ability to get rank 3 materials now is significantly harder than it was in Dragonflight. And so you have to like heavily spec into it, or like for example with ores and stuff like that, you can do the like convert X amount up to the next tier kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that that's kind of why we're seeing this, and I honestly think that that might be why the crafters aren't charging for crafting things now, because it's almost like the burden has shifted to now they're making money off of raw mats more than they're making money off crafting.
Mm.
And so the people who are playing this game of like crafting and stuff like that, they're also playing the auction house most likely. And I know that that's not everybody, but like if we're being real, the people who are min maxing crafting are also the people who are going to be min maxing what they're selling on the auction house.
Sure.
Um, and so I think that that's what's happened. I think that they realize that they can get more money out of the auction house. And so, in order to continue the business that they're getting from crafting, because they heavily invested in crafting early on in the expansion, they're just telling people to pay what they want to pay.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I like you say it costs 55K for an alt weapon. Like I remember being charged 30K by a crafter to build like a neck item. Like remember
The lariat.
the lariat was so good for everyone and so restricted in recipe drops that people were charging 30,000 gold just for that craft. And the mats weren't that expensive, but so I can see that shift. I mean, I guess the delve stuff sucks. Although I did see a change where they made that some of that stuff you can be bought now.
Yep.
So maybe that'll lower prices a little bit. I think maybe what you're talking about with the difficulty of rank 3 crafts will go down as well, or rank 3 mats rather, as people get more knowledge to
Yep.
spec into these trees. So so these things will go down over time as they normally do. It's just it seems like it's probably going to be a bit slower than
Hmm.
normal.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't really know what else because I haven't really been doing this myself. But that's just like my finger in the air estimate on why everything is this way. Um, and I hope that it changes because it's really expensive
I'm just
right now.
watching my money just go doop 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 doop. Doop. It's like, especially
Consumables are
like
killing me.
repair costs are pretty expensive too. Like I think I've seen this echoed in a couple places, and this is a good way of bringing us back to our central topic because we're supposed to be talking about Mythic Plus here. I I think the amount of money you get at the end of a Mythic Plus run needs to go up.
Yeah.
I think like 54 gold is laughable and it's a joke. Um, that's like even if you, I feel like even if you don't wipe in a run, that won't cover your repair cost from the run. Like it's just everything is so much more expensive. Like I'm not saying like the thing I'm not saying is that people that run Mythic Plus should just be able to completely fund everything they do in the game just from the gold rewards that you're getting at the end of Mythic Plus. Not saying that at all. I am saying they should cover a larger percentage of that cost than they are currently doing because I don't know like has was it 54 gold in Dragonflight too? Like we've had inflation, but we haven't had an increase in our hourly wage. And it's pretty
So
upsetting.
I don't remember what it was at the end of Dragonflight. The thing is the way I always looked at this was it essentially gives you an amount of gold as if you were to loot an item. And I don't even necessarily think that that's true anymore because I think the purples that we're getting from these dungeons, if it's a weapon, it's selling for multiple hundreds of gold.
Yeah.
So I think that it should be higher. I mean, I think that you should probably at least get 100 gold for completing a Mythic Plus dungeon at the bare minimum,
You know
right?
what?
Like,
Like, and if they're worried about people going crazy, like make it so the first 8 or 10 you do a week has an increased gold reward, right? And so
mhm,
you don't get people that degen it and just just farm Mythic Plus for gold, which is ridiculous. But like what if the first 8 dungeons you do in a week drop like 1K each?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's a lot of money, but it's not like you're not going to live off that, right? Like there's no way you can exist in the game off just 1K because that's or 8K, I guess that total that would be a week because that's not going to cover consumables, that's not going to cover enchants for the new stuff you buy. That's not going to cover anything, you know, but it'll help. It'll help.
I
And
think that the main drawback of this is going to be the Warlords of Draenor argument of, okay, well, things are rewarding you decent amounts of money and they're on a time frame, but then we have people with alt armies who are going to abuse that.
you know what, man? They have this cool new feature called war bands and you just make it. They already do this, right? Like there's certain rewards you get from things that are only your warband can only receive that reward once every so often. So just do it that way. Like
Mhm.
problem solved. I like I don't know. This is on the totem pole of problems with Mythic Plus. This is like pretty far down there. But I do think this is something that needs to be looked at because yeah, like everyone's spending a lot of money right now.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what made like it to be uncharitable. Maybe that's what they want. Maybe they want us to be going, oh, what's the price of the WoW token? Need to give me another WoW token. I don't know.
So the next Mythic Plus change, I guess, to kind of bring us back on track is the Necrotic Wake changes. And man, I'm really torn on these. I am very happy that they happened. I
Yes.
am very unhappy that they did it with reset.
So yeah, for context on the timing here, all these changes were announced on Wednesday of last week. So it was Wednesday the I don't even know time anymore. Wednesday the 9th, which was right after our episode came out, which made us look really, really smart. Um, Wednesday the 9th, they announced these changes. And yeah, this is the one they said some changes are out now, are live now. Some will come later today, and some will come with the next weekly reset. Necrotic Wake was the one. All the dungeon tuning changes were weekly reset ones. I understand why you're frustrated, because that's essentially telling people don't run this key this week,
Yeah.
which would be great, except we cannot control what keys we get. And just like we always do, we got a lot of Necrotic Wakes this week, and they just felt like a dead key. Now, they weren't technically a dead key. You could still run it. There were plenty of people who timed this on a 10, on an 11. Like, people were doing it, so it's not like people weren't doing it. But from a psychological perspective, if you get this key and you're like, oh, this 10 is going to be really hard, but if I wait 5 days, it won't be that hard anymore. You're going to want to wait. So yeah, I mean, sometimes I'm confused as to like what they can do via hotfixes and what they need like server resets for, especially
Hmm.
this one, because they brought the servers down on Friday. They had like a brief maintenance Friday morning. And so it's like, oh, so you were bringing everything down. So if you needed a reset to push these changes, well, here you got one.
Yeah.
The thing we don't actually know is we don't actually know, first of all, what their like internal like change management process is, right? Like, it could very well be possible that they announced these changes before they had actually found a way to fully implement them, and they're just like, all right, this is what we're going to do, this is our design goal, but we haven't actually like written the change yet. So we're going to need some time to do that. And if that's the case, I'd be a bit more lenient, but also maybe they just hold the change until it's live. I don't hold the like. This is funny because you and I have complained so much in the past. Like, Blizzard needs to be more communicative. They need to tell us what they're thinking. They need to tell us what they want to do, and then they do it. But they're like, "Oh, but it's going to take us a week to do it." We're like, "Man, fuck you! How dare you?" So I'm torn on this, but I totally understand and feel you on waiting a week for this was frustrating.
I just like they understood that there was a problem and they fixed it, and then they didn't push it immediately. And again, I completely agree with what you're saying. We don't know why, but also it just feels weird. It
Hmm.
feels weird that like we even got more announcements for changes as the week went on. Like the raid changes and everything like that didn't come in until yesterday, which would be Monday.
Hmm.
Was Monday the 14th. So I don't know. I feel like this is something that they probably could have just added in that patch notes that they released on Monday, and then it wouldn't have felt so bad.
Yeah. No, I agree. But they were trying to be communicative. So they're like, fuck guys. We're damned if we do, damned if we don't. But
Yeah, no, I get that. It's just I feel like that there needs to be some sort of like if you are explaining something to somebody, like some kind of sense of urgency around it, I
yeah.
guess is the real thing.
No,
Um,
I agree, especially since like Stitchflesh, it's been very clear since the start of season that Stitchflesh was broken and
yeah.
tuned poorly and unfair, and was killing keys left and right. And I'm with you. I'm very, very thankful that they got to it and the change is now live. And I haven't actually run the dungeon yet, but I hope it's easier. But yeah, frustrating for sure.
The other thing that I do want to kind of touch on is the plus 12 affix nerf. And the problem with this right now is I think that this is a good change ultimately, and it is allowing people to push further into the key like system. Um, I haven't really interacted with it much, but the I don't understand what the actual thought process is here, because to me this is still essentially setting up a brick wall at 12s. And sure, it's only a 10% damage increase instead of a 20% damage increase, but like that is still a large jump when you're also factoring in you are still infinitely scaling these keys. Like this goes from being X percentage per key level to X percent plus 10% at a 12. And so it's still a wall. It's still something people are going to have to get over. I don't think it's solving that problem.
Yeah, I didn't. I'm trying to think back of our conversations when these affixes were first announced, and I just think we underestimated what this
Yeah.
would what this would do and what this would be. I mean, I think like if you look at it from a design philosophy perspective, they're like, okay, we want to make high keys and other keys separate and distinct from each other. We're going to do that by having this rotating affix in lower keys. We have to get rid of that rotating affix in high keys to make it this process that doesn't have like a push weak or things like that that lets people just play the game. But are we just going to get rid of that affix? Is it just going to go away? And then nothing else? That feels a little weird. So like, no, we'll invent something else. We'll have like a new affix. Like before, Xalatath is kind of like helping you out. Here, Xalatath's just going to say fuck you. But I think the application of the fuck you is not satisfying.
Mhm.
And again, to your point, I have not done a 12. I have not attempted a 12 this season so far. I've timed an 11 or two. So I'm right on the cusp, and we'll be pushing towards there pretty soon, I think. But like it's a type of thing that they're solving a problem that I don't think exists, because like the point of keys is, as you said, it is this exponential scaling of difficulty, and like you don't need to do that huge increase, because you can just make it exponential. Like it's just like
Yeah.
it'll take care of that by itself. Like it'll do that, and you'll get to a key level where it'll be harder. Like adding extra damage on top of everything else just feels unnecessary. And yes, this change is ultimately good. People have been able to push into 12s easier. We've seen key levels rise dramatically after this was announced. People have timed, I think, a single 16 when I looked at it last night. Probably some more were done today. Lots of 15s, a single 16. The average key level is going up. The average score required for title is going up. Everything is going up based off this change. And that's ultimately good, because having a season where the progression just stops at 14 was boring. And like
Mhm.
it feels like you're done a month into the season, and that's bad. But yeah, I mean this is a band-aid fix for a design that I think ultimately I just don't think is good. Um
Yeah.
and it's still going to be very challenging for people to go to 11s to 12s, to your point. It's going to make each key progressively more challenging than it would be. And like I don't know, you want to progress. I guess this is a another interesting design philosophy conversation, because it's like, do you want to progress by like you need to run X key level 20 times in order to be good enough to be able to do X plus one? Or do you
Yeah.
want that to be kind of a slower but more constant across the season progression? Like when you had 30 key levels you were moving through, like you kind of steadily moved up as you went. Now it's going to be much more like chunks, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just, and is like, is that better? Um, I don't know. I think like in my head I like the previous system better, where it was just like kind of this smooth upwards movement, than these kind of weird chunks here. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that I like the old like numbering system and everything like that better. So I guess here's my thing. When we first talked about this, my assumption for this affix, and the reason that they put it in is they didn't want to be like, okay, well, going from an 11 to a 12 is now what used to be going from a 9 to a 10 is, where you pick up an affix that's helping you, and that key level is actually easier than the 9.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's the case we're going to be in right now, because these Xalatath's bargain affixes are so beneficial, so helpful, and we'll get into that even more here in just a little bit.
Yeah.
But like they do a lot for you that losing them is impactful in and of itself,
Yeah.
and you don't need the extra 10% to make sure that that 12 is not easier than an 11.
Hmm.
Um that's kind of what my thought process is. I like letting the key figure it out for itself. I've always been kind of like squeamish on affixes. I like that they change things up. I don't like that when you get into higher keys, you have something that's more pressure onto you than just the dungeon itself. Um, so yeah, I feel like this is still weird to me. It's not something that's going to completely ruin Mythic Plus for me. But I almost wonder if it's something that's needed now with how beneficial that the Xalatath's bargain affixes are.
Yeah, and I mean, one change we didn't talk about is that they increased the Xalatath's bargain benefits from 20 seconds to 30 seconds. So like they're already really good, and they're just making them better. And I like that they're leaning into that, because why not? Like, if you're gonna have this thing, why not make it actually really really good and really beneficial? That's part of the fun. I will say, like, overall, I do like this affix system much better than the old one still.
Yes. Yes.
That is not to say it doesn't have problems. I think they still need to look at the level 7 affix and see if 15 seconds is perhaps overly punishing at that key level. And yeah, I mean, I think they need to figure this stuff out at 12 for sure.
Mhm.
Because it just doesn't seem to work for me. I think one of the things I was hearing after this was announced, I know the professional keyers were talking about how, like, they really wish they had left like the HP increase to 20%, but just taken out the
The
damage
damage.
increase and just make it like it was on for the majority of the beta, because they said that was challenging, and you had to like that starts to push your timer a lot more, because you like just everything lives longer, so everything takes longer, but it doesn't get to the ridiculous levels of being one shot over and over and over again, which was like what we suffered from a lot in late Dragonflight, and something that they seem like they were trying to move away from. And I like that idea. I like the idea that, like, the challenge as you get higher, yes, things are going to do more damage, but the challenge is that you have less time to interact with and finish the key. Like that has always been the more interesting part to me, because
Yeah.
like when we talk about like boss mechanics in a Mythic Plus dungeon, like they're not they're not that fun in and of themselves. Like, there's some bosses that I think are more fun than others, but like when you've done these keys so many times, it's not like you're going to be like, oh hell yeah, this boss, I'm ready to have some fun. The fun is the race against time. The fun is figuring out ways to save a second here, a second there, and the challenge as you move up is that those seconds saved here and there become increasingly more important, and that ability to like find a second, to find 5 seconds, to like basically to do what like speedrunners do of video games in
Mhm.
general. Like that's in my mind always been the challenge of higher keys in Mythic Plus, not necessarily the can you survive this hit from this mob that on a 10 would have only done a fourth of your health, but now on a 15 is going to take your entire health bar. Like, that is boring to me. So
Yeah.
I would like them to move, especially in high keys, like like fucking call it time challenge mode, or and just make the timer matter more than it does in the lower ones. Like, you could just do that now. Like, uh, yeah, I just think this idea of like increasing damage to the point of absurdity. Like, and I know it will always eventually get to that point, because that's what infinitely scaling system is. Like, eventually mob damage is going to rise to the point of it's going to kill you in one hit. But it should, we've talked about this before, I think, but it should, in theory, you lose to the key because you don't have enough time to kill everything in the amount of time. That should happen before you're failing the key, because everything's just one-shotting you. Like, if you're designing an infinitely scaling system, I think it's better to lose on time than it is to lose on one-shots.
Yeah. Especially when you're losing 15 seconds on every one shot.
Yeah, true.
um, well, one thing I did have to say, just because I got to put it out there. You say that you don't go into any boss and think that this is fun. Well, I raise you the first boss of Mists. I'm happy every time I fight that boss. My
That's
number's
not,
really big.
that's just, you're looking at details. That's not like a fun mechanical fight. You're just looking at your details numbers. I remember that too. I remember being a resto druid in Dragon or in Shadowlands that would hit Heart of the Wild, go cat form, and just go fucking ham on that boss for 30 seconds or whatever. It was great. But that's not a fun fight. That's just DPS brain talking.
Well, in other news that is fun, how about just more damage? Do you like just dealing more damage? Because
I do.
there has been a pretty significant change to the Voidbound Xalatath's bargain affix. For anybody who doesn't know these by name, you should really get on that. I don't know why you don't know them by
I
name at
don't
this
know them
point.
by name. Fuck you.
But this is the one that summons the ad, and you have to burst it down. This is going from just being a 15%, I think, healing taken
Yeah.
increase. And was it mastery? Is that the other thing that you get with this?
No, it was originally a 30% DR or cooldown reduction.
Oh yeah, the CDR.
It was a 30% cooldown reduction and 15% healing taken increase. After this came out 2 weeks ago, they almost immediately buffed the CDR to 50%, um, which is great.
hmm
Uh, but now they've changed that. So they so you know it. Go. I can't remember what
They
exactly it is.
they reverted the buff, so essentially you're back down to 30%, and then they changed this 15% healing taken increase to no longer be that, and instead you just get 20% verse. Which, for those who don't understand what verse is, that is quite literally just 20% extra damage and healing and 10% less damage taken.
Yeah.
That is a absolutely massive buff.
It's
Like ginormously massive.
I mean, I guess the logic here, and I think this logic makes perfect sense, is you have to stop DPS on whatever you're fighting to get DPS onto this ad and DPS this ad down before it buffs the mobs too much. And so in theory, the killing of the mob should not only make up for all the damage loss you'd had to take when you had to switch to it and kill it, but it should, because it's giving you a benefit, be more than that. Like, you should not only get the damage you lost to kill the ad, but you should get more than that. And I guess the argument originally was, well, with the CDR, you will in essence be getting that because your cooldowns will come up faster. But I think maybe the data showed that just wasn't true. And so 20% verse is insane. Like, it's insanely good. And it lasts 30 seconds now because they buffed it to 30 seconds. So you have 30 seconds of increased damage and DR. I don't remember how often this affix comes, but I feel like it's a 1.5 to 2 minutes. So like 30 seconds every 2 minutes, you're gonna have 20% extra damage, 10% extra DR, and that's just the normal classes. The classes that like really like verse and stack verse, like, it's gonna be insane. It's gonna be absolutely
Mhm.
insane.
The other part of this that I don't think that you and I talked about when we were initially discussing this is yes, the 30 seconds change is absolutely massive for that as well. Because, I mean, somebody smarter than me can do the math there, but an additional 10 seconds with now 20% increased damage is an X amount damage increase that we didn't have if it would have stayed at 20 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Um, on top of that, though, the nerf from 50% CDR to 30% CDR, I think, is less impactful than people are going to realize. Because at 30% for 30 seconds, we're talking something like 9 seconds off your cooldowns.
Mm-hmm.
At 50% for 30 seconds, we're talking like maybe 15 seconds. Like, it's significant, but it's not so impactful that people are going to really realize it all that much.
Yeah, yeah. The verse side of this is definitely the much bigger. The increase in verse more than makes up for the 20% lost CDR, like, for sure. Like,
hmm
this is insane, and I think this is the least popular affix of the four. Which I guess maybe we don't have this on the thing, but we've seen all four affixes now. We've gotten to play keys in all four of them, so we now have a vision of what these four look like. And I don't know, which one are you thinking is the worst one in your opinion?
The worst one,
Yeah,
the Razagath Orbs. Like, not even close.
really interesting.
Yeah, I hate that affix.
But it gives
Like
you
the fact that you
haste.
have to use, yeah, but you have to use AoE stops in something we're already going to talk about a little bit later, a season that is not only causing you to need AoE stops, but then also punishing you for using AoE stops. But now you might have to rip them in the middle of a pack anyways, and just it fucks up everything. I think it's my least favorite by far.
Yeah, I don't like the absorb orb one, although they did make a change that'll make it a little easier. They made it so the orbs will come to you if there's no enemy target. Um, I like the weird one, the last week's one, and yeah, I don't know the names of any of these, so apologies. But last week's one was the heal or dispel one, basically afflicted on crack. That one I played with the shaman all week, so I did not experience what that would potentially be like in a non-shaman key. Um, I don't know. I was like, because my health bar on my tank will show like how much of my bar is the shield that needs to be healed off, and I'm a tank. I have a lot of health. It was not
Mhm.
a small chunk of my health. Like you just
Oh.
think, just thinking of how realistic it is to heal this thing off as a healer of 5 members of your group if you only have like 1 or 2 removals. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. So
Yeah, I have dubbed that affix the shaman affix, and I have dubbed every other affix the monk affix. So,
oh yeah, the monk does. The monk is really good at the Razageth orbs. Monk is really good at the uh Voidbound one because they can just touch
mhm.
a death it. It's kind of hilarious how good monk is at these affixes. Um, but is it so? I think you're right that obviously the clearest move on last week was just bring a shaman with poison cleansing totem, but that's a problem. Like
It is.
that is a major problem.
It's
And
only more solidifying the fact that shaman is one of the best DPS, or two of the best DPS,
mhm,
and like far bar none the best healer. I think if you look at 12 and over keys, they're like 80% of
yeah,
the healers in those
yeah,
keys.
because they're insane. They're insane. Their healing output is incredible. Their utility is awesome. They can deal with every one of the bad debuffs in the season. They can deal with poison. They can deal with curse. They have ample stops. They have the best kick in the game. And like, yeah, they're incredible. They're absolutely incredible. And yeah, now they are like Superman on this fucking affix, and it feels like that needs to be changed. I'm not sure exactly how to do it, but it feels like that needs to be changed.
I
And
think it does.
I like looking at all 4 of these. Um, I don't necessarily think that all of them need that big of adjustments. I understand your frustration with the Razageth ones. It doesn't bother me as much because it just AoE stops feel so useless that like burning them on some orbs, it's like, yeah, whatever. Um, but I get that. I also haven't done that one on super high keys yet because when that one last came around, I really wasn't that far in my key journey. So this will really be the first time I'll be doing like 10s or 11s with that FX. I guess it's not this week. It'll be one of the future weeks, but
Mhm.
so that might change my tune on it. Um, I think that's like I think the dispel one is the one that really feels like it needs a pretty critical adjustment to it very soon.
I'm going to be honest with the Dispo one. I still don't know how this thing works. Is it a heal absorb or is it not? Is it different?
It is not. It does not prevent you from receiving healing. So, like, if I'm at 100% and I get knocked down to 40%, and then the affix goes off, it's not like I will stay at 40% health until this is healed off. I will be healed up to 100%. And when I approach a certain amount of healing, it will also remove the debuff from me.
Okay.
So it doesn't stop you from receiving healing at all. So yeah, it can't kill you essentially. Um,
So this in theory, and I think we talked about this last week and I just didn't like commit it to memory. It is better for this to line up with a heavy damage part of a fight.
yeah, essentially, if this hits at the same time that your healer is having to put out a shit ton of HPS, it might just solve itself. You don't even have to rip the poison cleanse totem. Yeah, but if you have like a heavy damage part of the fight, you're going to be healing them up anyway. Yeah.
That's like so counterintuitive, especially when the base UI and I think pretty much any other UI displays this as a heal absorb,
hmm
which is not very clearly. communicated.
That is the problem with this one is it's very difficult to see and understand what's happening. And I also think like the atrocity UI that we use was like it's so tiny on my little thing. It's so difficult to see. Um, I think the game does a very bad job of like communicating this. I agree with you.
Mhm.
And yeah, it seems a little counterintuitive that like this is an affix where like they want to make the game don't play the affixes, play the dungeons, but also like you still need to react to the affixes. The ad spawns, you need to switch to kill it. The orbs appear, you need to rip a stop. The balls start heading to the boss, you need to stand in front of them. You still have to do something. This is one of the only ones where like sometimes you definitely have to do something right away. A shaman has to hit a totem, everyone has to dispel their own, and then the healer will get the other ones. But then, yeah, sometimes it's just like you don't have to do anything. It's just going to take care of itself. Don't even worry about it. And
Yeah.
that feels a little funky. I understand, like, because I think when they originally wrote this one, it was a heal absorb, and then like everyone, including me, my first reaction to that was like a heal absorb on everyone in the group that could come at the worst possible time. No, absolutely
That's
not. That's a terrible, terrible idea. And they were like, "Yeah, I know you're right," but that it puts us in this kind of weird place. I agree with you.
hmm Well, to circle back around to my frustration about the Razageth orbs, I think we need to have our weekly discussion about something I think we have talked about the last 3 weeks in a row. And I'm very sorry to everybody who has listened to this,
I'm not.
but I just, I have to say it again. I have to. What in the hell are they thinking with this stops change, man? Like in a coordinated group, in an absolutely giga chad coordinated group, this isn't having that big of an impact. It's still having an impact. It's still having a very significant impact because now instead of just being able to rip a stop to stop multiple casts, you're having to like consciously think we need to put our kicks on cooldown. And then we're needing to cycle things to give us time to get our kicks back off cooldown and then continue that cycle. Whereas before in Dragonflight, it's just you see 4 mobs casting, you have a demon hunter, they chaos nova, and you move on with your life.
Yeah.
That's just not what happens anymore. It's to the point, this is so annoying to me that when I do keys with my friends in guildies and we are just playing like we have for years and we're just like stopping things, like we throw down a cap totem and I waste my kick on something that's been capped. I'm losing it, man.
Yeah.
Like then I don't have a kick for a cast that's coming up. It's the most annoying thing ever. And that coupled with the fact that Blizzard is like doubling down on the fact that caster mobs are just deadly this season and they throw out a absolute must kick spell and then they also have these like random piss off casts that they do. Those also probably need to be kicked 9 times out of 10. It's way too much. We need to revisit this. I am going to say it until I'm blue in the face. I'm going to talk about it like every damn week apparently. It's pissing me off.
No, I mean I'm in 100% agreement with you here. I think in again, I completely understand where this change came from when you look at season 3 and 4 of Dragonflight and you look at how that season ended up operating and you look at the dominance of Demon Hunter and just at AoE stops in general, they were just too strong. But I really do think this is fixing it is treating the symptom and not the cause of these problems. The cause of these problems is that they have absolutely stuffed these keys with just mobs. Every mob has to do something. Every single one has to do something. There's like no mobs in this game left anymore that just stand there and white hit your tank. They all have to do something else, and most of those things need to be stopped. And the game, like, it's not need to be stopped in order to time a high key. It's need to be stopped. They've been very clear about this, that part of the game in any key at any level is that you should be stopping these things or we're gonna fuck you up. And yeah, I mean, like, by reducing the effectiveness of AoE stops, but making zero changes to the number of mobs and the frequency of casts, you've created this situation where unless you are in a pitch perfect coordinated group that is confident that no one's going to overlap, no one's going to burn a kick when a cap totem goes out. Everyone's going to do anything perfect. Unless you are that group, you are going to be hitting your head against stupid things. The most frustrating thing in the world as a tank for me is that like you see something casting, like you look over at your thing, you have no kicks, you're almost out of AoE stops, and then you just see someone drop dead. And it's like, this isn't even like we played bad and missed a kick. This is just we burned a kick that would have interrupted the mob had someone not hit in cap roar a second or earlier. It just, it's not rewarding. It's not punishing bad gameplay in the way it should be. Like the consequence outweighs like the coordination. I just, yeah, I don't know if they need to just completely revert this change. I think they need to once again do a pass on these mobs and say, is it fun? Is it good that everything is casting this much constantly, and these casts do this much damage, and we need to interrupt every single one of these casts. We need to do a good job. Like I would be fine if we carve all this out and get rid of all of it, and then just have everyone has one kick, and then we have just much less mobs that do this kind of thing, and that still requires coordination. And as the higher you get in keys, the more coordination it requires. But God, it would just, yeah, I hate this. I hate it. I hate it.
I think the thing that kills this for me is I have not been playing in a 5-man very much this season. When we are in a 5-man, this tends to not be as big of a deal for me because we can communicate. The second you introduce one person not in comms, this entire thing falls apart.
Yeah.
Because now that they can just rip their CC whenever, and you had a plan, you burn your kick, you overlap CC, you no longer have a plan. The other thing is the classes that are good right now, a lot of them share CC types. Shaman, stuns. Warrior, stuns. Paladin, stuns. Warlock, stuns. Like, this just DRs the mobs. You get to a point where you can't even CC the mobs.
Mm-hmm.
It is a horrible problem right now. I don't know what they want to do to fix it. And again, I feel like I'm complaining, and I have like stated from the beginning, like, we have done decently high keys. We have played in coordinated groups, and it's weird that I'm the one complaining about this, I think. But also, like I said, you introduce even one person not in comms, and this entire system just crumbles.
I'm gonna go further than that, because I think in a group of 5 where you play together regularly, you start to get a feeling for everyone, and you kind of know what people like to use when, and how you approach these things, and like you get used to all these things even without comms. You get used to all these things. You get used to how people operate and what they do. But you take one of those people away and introduce a new person, even in comms, and there's still a chance that you fuck up, because like half the times, like, you know, a lot of people have been so ingrained instinctually by this game that they see a cast, they see it's about to get off, and they just rip something. And it's like, I don't have my kick, so I'm just gonna rip roar, or I'm gonna typhoon, or I'm gonna like, and you just do it. And then like what we had last week a lot happen is like the second I hit that button, someone would be like, I got this kick, like that, and it would just like within a second of each other. But that doesn't matter. It's done by then.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's just like it is absolutely a thing where having a consistent group of 5 people will make this so much easier to deal with. But the majority of people that interact with the system do not interact with it that way. The majority of people interact with the system pug, and they want to be able to pug as high as they per their skill level can go. And if what we're really saying is we only want pugs to get up to 8s, if that's really what we're saying, then people are going to quit this game very fast, because they're just going to run out of stuff to do, because getting from a 2 to an 8 not going to take you that long.
Yeah, I think the other part of this that makes this feel exceptionally bad is Blizzard's like insistence on trying to slow down dungeon pulls, but also making timers more demanding and challenging this season. Um, it feels like you have two things conflicting with each other right now. In
Yeah.
that, in season 3 of Dragonflight, when we were really heavily pushing, I think the norm for us was double pulling at a bare minimum, if not triple or quadruple pulling packs. You just literally cannot do that right now.
Yeah.
And you can, right? Like if you have the damage, you can get through anything. If you have the healing, you can get through anything. But generally, you just can't do that right now.
Yeah, and that should be rewarded at the very top end, like for players able to do that, right? Like the reason why the best players in the world are able to time keys that nobody else can is because they find a way to pull big and control the pack at the same time. That's why they're the best at this game, right? They can pull 3 packs, they can pull 4 packs, and they can lock those packs down in a way that nobody else can. That requires communication, that requires this constant plan, that they have every single kick, every single stop, every single thing planned out from the beginning of the pull to the end of the pull. And that's fine. That should be rewarded that way, right? Like that should be like if you are that good at that, congratulations, you should be one of the best players in the game. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is the person that gets home from work, hops on the game, and wants to do some Mythic Plus. Like, is Mythic Plus supposed to be a home for hardcore players, or is it supposed to be one path of play for anyone that enjoys this game? And if the answer is the latter, which I think it is, this is not supposed to just be for the crazy hardcore player, then this is a stupid. This is a stupid change we exist in. This is a stupid design we exist in right now.
I think that if I was complaining about this and we were doing 12s, I would be more okay with what's happening.
Yeah.
But these casts, random casts, are just killing people on 8s,
Yeah.
9s,
Yeah.
10s, 11s, which, I mean, I don't know. Like, portals used to be this like thing that people would strive for, right? Like, Keystone Hero used to be this thing people would strive for. And I guess that maybe we're going back to a situation to where like 20s now 10s are getting harder, and that's fine. But when we were in Dragonflight, you could miss pretty much every single cast, targeted cast, and still time a 20. Like you probably didn't have to kick any of them.
Well, yeah, I
And
mean, like the timers were more lenient and there wasn't a 15-second difficulty if one person happened to die because they got targeted by 2 casts and neither of those casts got kicked. It's like, okay, we lose 5 seconds. That's not great. Try to do better. We won't time a 29 with that, but at 2021, maybe we'll be okay. Um, that's not the case anymore. Yeah.
hmm. Well, I think I've harped on this enough, and I know it'll probably come up again in future weeks. I'm just hopeful. I still have my fingers crossed that they'll do something about this. I'm not hopeful that they'll do something about it this season, but man, I really hope that they do something about it in season 2.
The reason why I think this is important is because this is a thing that I don't see a lot of the content creators complaining about, and I think it's because they're playing in groups of coordinated people that are like this is in my mind the difference between those people and you and I is that like
Mhm.
they're very good at this game and they're good. They play a lot. They should be good at the game. It's what they do. They're on the MDI or they're doing top end keys, and I haven't seen them complain about this change very much. And I get why not. But yeah, I agree with you. Coming from the people that don't have a set group that play with guildies mostly, but it's like a revolving door of guildies. It depends on who's on at the time and who wants to do stuff and who's capable of doing stuff. It's just it's incredibly frustrating. I just so many times this week hearing you go, stop it, I can kick it, stop it. I'm
Yeah.
gonna knock. No, don't knock. Don't. I have a kick.
Just let me kick the damn cast. Oh man. Well, I think another thing that we should talk about, and this might be very tilting for some people, but maybe not for some others. Some no healer keys have been popping up, and there has been a couple of people on YouTube specifically who have been making videos around these keys, doing 10s, 11s with no healer. And even to the point of doing like I think all 8s have been timed with groups of nothing but tanks, which is absolutely hysterical to me.
Yeah.
Um, but I want to bring this up because I don't want people to grab their pitchforks yet. I don't think this is as degenerate as it was in Dragonflight. I don't think it's something that we need to be concerned with. Um, it's something to the point of like they don't have a set comp. They do this with different people every time. It's not you have one guy who's just out healing what a healer would be doing anyways. Um Really the only staple of this comp seems to be they have a bear tank. And I think that that's just because it's the content creator making the content is a bear tank, and that's the reason for it.
Yeah, I like. Who cares? Is my opinion. Like, if you're actually genuinely upset about this, I think you're a very silly person. Like, it's obviously not the norm. It's not going to be the thing like the big worry in Shadowlands, or sorry, in Dragonflight was going to be like when we started seeing this in the MDI, when we started seeing this in the TGP, and people were like, whoa, 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 these are supposed to be like the most challenging keys ever, the hardest key. Like that sends a weird message. I don't think that's going to be the case this season, and I don't have a problem with people trying to run silly comps. I actually like this is one of the things I like about this game as compared to a game like Final Fantasy, which is pretty restrictive on like what you can bring to things. I like when we can be silly like this, and you can kind of develop your own composition and have fun with it. Like, who cares? Like, who cares? Yeah, you did it. Like, a group of very, very skilled players got together and they were able to do something that not anyone else can do. And it just happened to not have a healer. Cool. That's great. As a healer,
uh
I am not offended by this whatsoever.
I think the most interesting part of this, and the reason I put it here, is because in the high end keys, we're seeing og all over the place. Not all of these keys with no healer have an og, which is absolutely wild to me.
Yeah,
Some of them,
I would have greatly assumed that that was part of the comp of this.
yeah,
Yeah.
some of them do, however, or most of them have rep paladins, which I don't know how well versed you are in rep paladin. I obviously play it a lot, so this isn't news to me. Rhett has a talent that when you Divine Storm, you heal nearby members.
Okay.
That's healing and leeching currently, so it is like significant healing right now, especially if you stack two paladins on top of each other, and they're both taking Templar. So when they Wake of Ashes, they're now healing themselves and giving themselves a shield on top of all of this. Um, yeah, it's interesting. It's just interesting comps, and it isn't like off healing in the sense that we've thought about it in the past, where it's
Yeah.
like shamans, priests, and everybody who can just heal and deal damage at the
Yeah.
same time.
You press one
Uh,
button and then just carry on with your rotation, and everyone's at full. Yeah.
it is funny though because it is just healing and dealing damage at the same time. It's just a different avenue of healing and dealing damage at the same time. But yeah, I just wanted to call it out because I thought it was interesting. I thought it was cool to see. And I'm always happy to see people doing weird things.
Yeah, I love people doing weird things. Everyone, if you're actually genuinely upset about this, take a step back and realize that this doesn't affect you at all. I promise you. I promise you. There is never, if you are a healer, there is never a situation in which you were not invited to a key specifically because they were like, "Well, we don't need healers." That's never going to happen. So just stop it. Just stop it.
um, so I think the last thing that we haven't talked about that I said that we were going to is the raid nerfs. And on this topic, I don't really have much to say. Um, the nerfs to Ansarek were verbatim what you said needed to happen, which is kind of funny. I don't know if you stated it on this
I don't think I
show
did.
or not,
Yeah.
but you have said this since the beginning that this is the change that they would make if they wanted to nerf Ansarek. They did a couple more changes as well, but I think the main one is the frothing toxin. So I'll let you chat to that a little bit.
Yeah, so essentially, if you haven't done this fight, the way Frothing Toxin works is there are these two circles that you have to pop the middle of, and that's what flings you into the air over the boss's expanding wave of death. That if it hits you, you will die. The way it works in Heroic is you will get a stack of this Frothing Toxin debuff based on how many people were in the circle when it went off. What it was doing like so the best you can do if all your raiders are separated properly with an equal amount in each of the two circles, you would get 2 stacks, and the 2 stacks would take damage to everyone, and then at the end of their debuff would explode to do about a bunch of damage to the raid based on how many stacks you have. What the boss was doing was it would count dead people for that calculation. So, for example, you're running a raid with 16 people, you divide each 8 and 8 in the two things, but someone dies before it goes off. So they were not in the circle. Then you would get 3 stacks of the debuff for the end. And so you lose 2 people, and then you do everything perfectly, but you have 2 dead people. Then you get 4 stacks of the debuff. And so what it did was it kind of just exponentially escalated the cost of losing a person early in the fight. Like, not only did you lose their damage, not only did it just mess things up at the event of their death, but it also snowballed into more and more damage being done to you over the course of the fight. I mean, that was, I think, a lot of the people struggle with this first phase of the fight, was that it just became harder and harder, like the more people you lost. So it was the type of thing where one individual's individual mistake snowballed into horrible consequences for the entire raid.
Mhm.
And that makes it very difficult to prog on when you're learning and people are still messing up a little bit. And so yeah, it just seemed logical to me that if they want to make this boss easier, if they want to help kind of smooth out the progression of phase one, they just, if someone dies, no longer calculate them in this calculation of how many debuffs everyone's going to get. And that's exactly what they did. So if you're dead, you will no longer be considered a part of the party for this calculation, which totally makes sense. Good change. Glad they did it. Glad we killed it before they did it, by the way. I always like to
Yeah.
kill these bosses before they're nerfed, but
Yeah, I agree. And really, the other part of this is more sweeping changes, like I had already said earlier, to Mythic Ansarek as well. Um, I'm not going to go into detail about those because I think that you and I are very significantly far away from ever doing Mythic Ansarek.
yeah.
And if you are listening to the podcast and you are interested in those, Wowhead's got you covered. So go check out Wowhead, and they will let you know what the changes were to Mythic Ansarek.
I did look at the changes, and they feel like it, like huge changes, like they fucking buried this boss just by looking at the numbers on those changes. And then you go to Twitter, and I saw that Max from Liquid said Ansarek is still probably a 300 pull boss for new guilds. The nerfs are really good, but that boss is insanely hard. So
Mhm.
so still probably a 300 pull boss for a new guild getting to it. So yeah, it's really difficult to gauge how significant these things are when you're not one of the ones directly dealing with them at the time, for sure.
Yeah. I don't think that there's anything else really raid wise I wanted to talk about. Again, Court got some mythic nerfs. Um, I really think that those are the only two bosses that got touched.
It felt like it felt like the reason they nerfed Court was because a bunch of people killed it using the exploit, and so they were like, "Shit, we got to make this easier for everyone else. Quick, nerf it." That's probably not the reason, but that's what it felt like.
Yeah, that would be hilarious if that was the case. I mean, shame on you for doing it, but also that is pretty comical. um, well, I think that we are pretty much covered everything that we wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
I did have the question for today is going to be rather long, and it's going to be kind of two pronged.
Okay.
Um, we've been talking about suggestions, and we have had suggestions in the past about the stops changes. Um, my kind of plea to everybody listening is, what do you think could help better the community in handling the stops changes? Or even like, what are your suggestions in how to make this better in general for the game? It is something that I feel very passionate about because I feel like this is not ruining the pug scene, but it is making pugging very hard. And I think that this game dies if we don't have a strong, healthy pug scene because the majority of people are interacting with the game in that way.
Yep,
And
I agree.
so it's very concerning to me. So my question is, what would you suggest to help people out in this? What would you suggest to the devs to make this better? And if you have any cool implementations that you could think up, feel free to leave them in the comments. As always, we'd love to hear them, and we try to read every single comment that is on the YouTube videos. Um,
Yeah, we will definitely
yeah.
steal them and submit them to Blizzard and then take full credit for them. So please send them to us.
That being said, though, Scott, I think that it is it's time to sign off here. So as always, you guys can contact us over at yellingintothevoidwow@gmail.com. YouTube is at yellingintothevoidwow, and Twitter is at intothevoidwow.
And if you are not subscribed to this podcast, we really recommend you do that. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, of course, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found. And I really think, folks, this is your homework for today. Answering the question, yes, but please share the show with some of your friends that play World of Warcraft. Please do, because we're really relying on you guys to grow right now. We're relying on algorithms and people, and I would much rather grow via people than this silly algorithm that I still haven't figured out how some of our episodes do really well and then some of them don't, and I don't understand it at all. But you could help us. I know this is a community game. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably play this game with a lot of people, and it'd be great if you could share this podcast with them.
Also, please consider liking, subscribing, and again, commenting on the YouTube video. All of this helps us get more exposure and introduces us to new people and helps us tweak that algorithm that Scott's talking about so that we can maybe try to leverage that on top of the word of mouth that you guys are going to help us out with, right?
Yeah, I mean, we got to play both sides for sure.
But anyways, guys, we don't have much else to cover here, and hopefully maybe next week we'll be talking about changes that they made to the stops. But until
On.
next week, we'll be over here just yelling into the void.